All right, here we are.
Here we are.
How are you feeling?
Great.
Yeah, you're actually feeling pretty good.
I do feel good.
You feel better than me.
How would we know who's feeling better? It's impossible.
I think the walk test, see
Hmm.
who's walking more.
Yeah, I was definitely walking better this morning.
Yeah.
So, today we're really talking about an upcoming event and a training that we're doing called the Vector Project. But because we just did this weekend, this Saturday, today's Monday, a 50K trail run, it was
Mhm.
actually 33 point something.
Mhm.
Slightly more than 50K, but um and we had that experience. We felt like it was a great opportunity to just talk about doing something challenging, training or not training for things that are challenging,
Yeah.
the value of an event, all that. So it was kind of a perfect time. Um, the Vector Project is a 9-week training program that culminates in an event, which is a 12-mile ruck into a 6-mile run.
Mhm.
No, no wait.
No wait on the run.
Right. And so that program has a weekly run workout, ruck workout, strength session focused
Yeah,
on,
3 workouts a week to prepare you for what most would say is not something you should just show up and do,
yeah, yeah,
which is exactly what we did,
right,
more or less, in terms for the 50K. We did not train for the 50K.
right. But speaking to the Vector Project, that is a 9-week training program leading up to an event. Now, that event, for people that are listening and might be like, well, I could never run 6 miles, it's it is able to be tweaked per individual. There might be some walking, but the point is it's culminating in an event that like should have a little bit of a, that could be
It should challenge
challenging.
you.
Right.
Totally.
So that depends on the individual. What weights in the ruck, all those details are kind of person dependent. But in this case, there is a training program.
Mhm.
So the 50K,
The 50K, yeah.
our event that we
Mhm.
just did.
Mhm. Well, not our event, but we
So in May, I like to do endurance events. We know this.
yeah.
So I had kind of wanted to do something different that I'd never done before, and I'd
Mhm.
never run farther than a marathon, and I'd never done a trail run.
Mhm.
So I signed up, and I had plans to train for 16 weeks.
Yeah, you did. That's right.
And I got about a week, maybe 2 weeks into a training program, which was great. A friend of mine, Nast, she wrote it. It was very knowledgeable. But I made a decision at that point that I actually didn't have the capacity to train at that
Mm.
time in my life
Mhm.
or the desire.
Mhm.
So I didn't. And then you decided a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
along with two other friends, that you would also do this event. What made you just decide at the last minute to do this? Because that's not really, you haven't been doing
I've never
endurance
done
things.
I've never done any event that requires registration.
Right. Like you've done the military endurance, but not for like recreation.
That's right.
So why did you, was it peer pressure?
A friend of ours, Chemo, asked if I was gonna do it, if I was interested in doing it, and like why wouldn't I or would I?
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of hanging around talking, and I didn't really have a good answer
To not do it.
other than like, yeah, I just don't feel like it.
Right.
I mean, and not to say that you have to have a direct, clear, concrete answer for everything in life, but in that moment, I didn't like that I did not have a legitimate answer that didn't sound more like I just don't want to be inconvenienced.
Sure.
And I make a living, and my life is sort of dedicated to navigating challenging experiences with people.
Mm.
So I feel like it's my responsibility
To step into.
to not
Yeah.
yeah, to step into that.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Fuck it, let's do it."
And then we kind of had a very challenging August. Arguably, going into this event, our fitness was probably not at a high point, I'd say.
Bottom third.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about like what's the value though of challenging yourself.
Mhm.
And of course, there are life challenges that present themselves to people. And typically, those are like hopefully unexpected and unfortunate. But these are events and things that you can step into and purposefully say, like, I'm going to take on this challenge. And what's interesting about them is while they're a physical exercise, it's, in my opinion, like 99% mental. The challenge becomes mental. Of course, there's the physical
Mhm.
that opens that door.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, obviously, you're saying you felt like you wanted to challenge yourself and do that because that's important to you with what you do for your work. Um, but anything else on like what you think the value of like when you did the event, what was challenging for you this weekend? What would you classify as like were you challenged by the
Yes.
50K?
Yeah.
Okay. What was that and like what did you feel like you got from it?
It was definitely challenging. Physically, I started feeling pain very early on, inside 2 hours of a 7-hour event, a little over 7 hours. Um, so physically, it was very challenging. It hurt.
Mhm.
There was a lot of pain. Um, I was challenged mentally by having to be honest with myself and factor in the fact that I did not train. Like I've put myself in the hospital by being dumb when it comes
Mhm.
to like pushing myself beyond beyond what my body can tolerate. People say, "Oh, your mind, your body can." There's a physical limit to it,
Sure,
and I've
sure.
done that. And those were very difficult to. They were challenging,
Mhm.
and part of the challenging thing I think for me to offer like a framing, I don't view challenging necessarily as this like overly heavy thing.
Mhm.
Challenge is simply not knowing how it's going to go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is. So I challenged myself more so from a place of curiosity in the intention, which was the primary intention was, can I do this?
Right. Not really having data to prove or, well, I've done this, I've done that.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, I don't know what's going to hurt, what's going to come up, how it's going to go. And
Yeah.
here I go.
Challenge
Yeah.
is a question.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Sure.
So go into that with
Yeah.
curiosity and be honest through that process. That is
Mm.
challenging. And I use this 50K also as an opportunity to validate some of the mindset work we've been
Hmm. Yeah.
formalizing
Right.
more. And that's probably a separate podcast, but that project, which is really, really cool and really exciting, worked wonders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
You need an experience for those
yeah,
to test them.
yeah, yeah. So, in that regard, I was like, afterwards, like I said to you, I was like, man, I thought I was actually moving faster.
Hmm.
So that's a challenge to me in terms of how I view myself and my
Hmm.
capability and, all of that. And, I was challenged by um, really having on the fourth of fifth full lap, having to walk a lot of it more than I had any other lap
Hmm.
and be humble and
Yeah.
be honest with that because my intention also was to finish strong,
Right.
always finish strong and run as much as unless it was an uphill, run every bit of that final
Yeah.
10K. And so yeah,
Yeah.
so that was good. But how about you? You said you struggled.
Yeah. When you say like challenging doesn't always have to be heavy, like for me, I had like a heavy challenge. And I
Yeah.
think what's weird or strange about this event is there was never a question about like walking and finishing in the time.
Mm,
So then the next question is like, okay, so if like you could walk, like what was so hard about that moment of like doubt?
hmm.
And it does come down to like, well, wanting to continue to push yourself. And for me, I think not knowing like, am I going to be able to push myself further or am I just going to,
So not knowing if you
yeah,
could
like
perform.
in that moment, like there was no it's like a weird thing. It's like, well, I know I could have walked and finished, but then is that my best? Is that the
Mhm.
best I could do? So it's this like question of like when it's really hard, like what is my best? Like being honest about that.
Mm, mm,
And then there's like pressure with that in for me.
yeah.
But yeah, for me, I had actually done the loop a couple times, like not a couple in a row, but like I did the loop, came back another day, did the loop.
Yeah.
One loop turned out it's not that hard. It was the multiple. But yeah, I think what I mean by like the mental challenge is like the pain is pain is pain. It's what for me what started to happen and what that story was in my mind, what that was telling me. The
Mhm,
pain was starting to like now I was creating a story and a narrative around it that I'm old, I'm less than, I'm what am I
mhm,
doing? Like I'm never good at things. And that was like pulling me down. And then the overwhelm of how much further there was. So similarly, I also employed the one of our mindsets, um, be here now. And I think one of the things that was so beautiful about that is it is like a mantra that really worked for me.
yeah.
Like because it wasn't just say it once and like, oh yeah, be present.
Right.
It was kind of like, okay, just coming back to it, coming back to it. And so yeah, it was the value of that challenge for me. In every endurance event I've done, I've had
Yeah.
a challenge. Arguably, if you finish and there was never a challenge, it's like kind of like, maybe I didn't like go hard enough. Like I think that
Mhm,
that's the nugget, So
yeah.
I think the value of like why try something that's challenging is because it might sound cliche, but if you don't experience growth from that, like you missed it.
Mhm.
So I definitely don't think you might have a challenge and not choose to grow from it, but you're definitely not going to grow without a challenge. So
No,
yeah.
I think too, it gives we talked about this yesterday, but it gives, just material to
Yeah.
digest and lessons to learn, and, I think endurance events, and I say this now, I can say this as an endurance athlete, having done one.
Hmm.
Having done a lot of long distance solo
Movements. Hmm.
movements, endurance type events like that are similar to like lowercase p psychedelic like
Hmm.
experiences in the framing that psychedelics are often called non-specific amplifiers.
Right.
Whatever's happening within you is going to be amplified and come out.
Because
And
almost like the body's breaking down and those
yeah,
mechanisms are sort of.
yeah, the body's breaking down. I think there's also the thing of physical movement.
Mhm.
There's the bilateral stimulation, which has an effect on neural networks.
Yeah.
And there's the there's the time with yourself.
Sure.
We were talking to my little brother Tommy, and he was like, well, yeah, he asked about like, what playlist, and I said, like I didn't listen to a second of music, and he was like, oh, like raw dogging it. And now I've driven across the country looking through the windshield
Mhm.
without ever turning the radio on, and maybe that's psychopathic, but
Yes,
like,
it is.
but the point is, you know, you have an opportunity to be with yourself
Sure.
for a long time,
Yeah.
which is challenging for
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
people. So that is one of the reasons why I think these events are, our friend
Yeah.
Stacy just finished at fucking midnight this morning,
Mhm.
Ironman, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Like, why, it's amazing the growth, the transformation, the breakdown, and the build up.
Yeah.
That's all, man. You can go super spiritual with that if you
Sure.
wanted, but it's,
And I think the duration, one of the things with like why these types of events, even Vector Project, there's a reason why it's longer
yeah.
because while there might be an uncomfortable workout you do, 15, 20 minutes, you're just not accessing the range of emotions and those different highs and lows that you go through. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, so basically, these events, I think, just inherent in them have an ability to challenge yourself mentally, physically. Um, and that's kind of why one of the reasons we created the Vector Project, something too that's accessible.
Yes.
Yes, a lot of people could walk a 50K, but this is like the duration, the rucking, it's all very accessible to people.
Hmm.
and that is also something we wanted to have as an event.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of why we also did it that way. Not everybody wants to go run or bike 100 miles. So
Right.
um, now we didn't train for this. However, I think we've been training the way we train. It was kind of a great way to validate kind of how we
Hmm.
do things on a day to day. But for this particular project, there is specific training.
For the vector project.
Right.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
we think that's valuable for several reasons.
Hmm.
Most people would say we would generally tell people you should train for things. Um, so we talk a lot about training, the difference between training and exercise.
Yeah.
How do you basically you have a pretty black and white line for that.
Yeah.
What do
Well,
you say?
I can tell the extent to of your training based upon the extent of what you're sacrificing. And if you're not sacrificing anything,
Hmm.
we'll talk about physical, we'll talk about the gym, we'll talk about movement.
Right.
If you're not sacrificing modalities, types of workouts, etc., you're not training. Training is not a process of adding more. Training is a process of
Mm.
taking more away.
Right. And I think people can get confused by that as well because I think often people think of training as like, oh, doing more or like the things I really like. Sometimes training is like taking a step back, doing some of the things that might be productive for the training, but they're not exactly what you prefer to do.
Yeah.
So sacrifice doesn't just mean sacrificing time more. I think people can get wrapped up in that where it's like, oh yeah, I'm training, I'm doing all this stuff. But it's really like dialing in and having it be very effective, which can sometimes mean
Hmm.
less and different than maybe what you want to do.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And you have to focus on it. And when
mhm,
you focus on a specific pursuit,
other
however,
things have to
however,
fall away.
yeah, the
Yeah.
things have to fall
Yeah.
away to include maybe secondary and tertiary effects, body
Hmm.
composition, how you're feeling, your health. Like we
Sure.
joked about it, but like my God, if I don't get a cavity or diabetes by the end of this 50K, it's going to be a minor miracle. But like
Yeah.
so if you're training for something, show me what you're
Hmm.
sacrificing, and I'll show you if you're and I'll
Yeah.
and we can assign that. So for us, how we quote unquote train, how we prepare, how we exercise is not training in the sense that we're not really sacrificing. We're doing
Right.
a little bit of everything.
Sure.
And more so than a CrossFit thing where we're generalists, we do a little bit of everything. No,
Hmm.
we push that out further
Right.
and include different things. So for us, for me, I wanted this 50K to be, in the summer and a few months back, we did the whole litmus thing. We had a couple sessions of that, and we'll bring it
Hmm.
back at some point. But for me, it was a personal litmus.
Yeah.
Let me see. Let me dip this litmus paper into my fitness vat, and that is a 50K. Will I
Yeah.
pass? Will I fail?
Yeah.
It's going to be one
Right.
or the other.
Different from if you had said, I'm going to train for this, the sacrifice would have been you would have had to probably, when you talk about even body comp, like you would
Hmm.
have to be running more. There would be some sacrifices there. So on all fronts. But
Yeah.
as it relates to the vector project, one of the things I like about it is, well, yes, there's commitment, there's consistency because it's a ruck and a run and the distances we've chosen. Woven in there are actually some really good things for overall strength.
Hmm.
Like it's kind of sneaky in that of course there's sacrifice and there's more about like preferences. Like you might not prefer like, oh, I don't really feel like rocking today. And it's like, but this week, like you need to get this in.
Right.
But I like it in that it's a it is an event that prepares you in a way that's healthy and promotes longevity because you're working strength, rucking is like a good tool if you do it correctly.
Hmm.
There's not a ton of running. Um, for some people they're going to be walking. So while it is training and it has some of those valuable pieces, it's also a really good event that promotes some of the stuff we think are really important.
And that's on the physical side.
Right, the physical.
There's also a complementary mental mindset element to the vector project, because the
Yes.
vector, why we said, well, what's the deal with the name? Vector is about direction. It's about where you're headed,
Mm,
and you vector towards something, or if it's a direction of travel. Pilots will have their own definition for it, but basically it's a direction. And we have, throughout the 9 weeks, different we vector internally for folks to look at the non-physical and guide them along that, because that is so much of the work that you take into a challenging event. Again, it's a non-specific
mm,
amplifier. So clean up what's inside, at
sure.
least be aware of what's inside, because when it's, hour 6 or whatever it might be, hour 4, doesn't matter. That's going to come up.
Yeah.
It is going to come up. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about these events. You and I both just did a sub 20-minute workout today. It was friggin' hard.
Hmm.
Done. Like, it's kind of like, okay, on to the next.
Right.
48 hours ago, we were on the trail, and it's still with us.
Yeah.
So the sort of mindset component, the exercises, the concepts, listening, like we assigned some, listening to
Homework.
some things
Hmm.
and some projects for people to, kind of go through, raise their awareness, and then take into the final event.
Yeah.
Because that 12 plus 6, or whatever the distances are for that person, is the sort of culminating event, is the celebration, and is where you get to then see.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes people can miss, I heard someone, we talk about this, and I actually heard someone on the trail going into, maybe it was my final lap, say to his wife or the person he was with, like, let's just get this over with. And we talk about this a lot, like the
Yeah.
skipping past the thing to get to the thing to get it done. And it's like, well, what was the point?
Yeah.
So I think the mindsets in the Vector project and that homework really is beautiful, because it keeps people in the process and grounded to, like, why am I doing this and what am I learning? Not just check the box, did the thing, what's next? It makes it helps people treat it like a process, not just a checklist.
Totally. Yeah.
Um, so
uh
what's interesting about this event, the one we did, we could have, when it wasn't a closed loop, it wasn't a closed trail. So as you're hobbling along, there's like people, just leisurely walking with their kids, with their animals, like,
hmm
not part of the event.
Yeah.
So we could have, like, shown up on any day
Yeah.
and done
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, no one was gonna steal our Skittles from the parking bench, like the picnic table. But we didn't. We signed up for that day. We paid money for registration
hmm
and had friends and had other people we didn't know started on the start line together.
Yeah.
And so I think, while sure there's many things you can do, and why not just do it on your own? I think having like a day, a date, an
hmm
actual event, like, it does present some accountability. Doing it with other people is super valuable.
hmm
So the Vector project, there is 9 weeks, and then the 10th week, the expectation is you're doing the event.
That's right.
Now, some people might have to do it on their own.
Yeah.
However, we encourage people, you have a month until the training starts.
hmm
Like, maybe you get some people to sign up together. Maybe you're not in the same place in the world, but you say you're going to do it on the same date.
Yeah.
There's many different ways to really make the most out of this event.
hmm
Um, we are hosting it here in Gladstone, New Jersey, in the park. There are hotels here. One could potentially travel here and do it on that date, November 30th.
We've had someone travel internationally to do an
Yes.
event with us.
Yeah.
And that is what I think is amazing about why events matter,
Hmm.
because you open yourself up to being inspired by others' efforts.
Yeah.
And that was something that I was like moved by. I've been moved by it when I've seen you do your races, and I was moved by it obviously when we did our 4x4 by 48, Mel coming out. and I was moved by it 2 days ago,
Yeah.
where I'm like,
Yeah, it means something.
yeah, it means something. And you just see the rawness of human effort. That's the human spirit. And there's a lot. You go on Instagram or social media and you see how we suck all the time, all the fucking time. How we suck. You come together in physical hardship with a bunch of people and you see how
Mm,
we're awesome.
yeah. And just having other people there at the finish, or, waiting for someone and seeing them across the finish, or
Yeah.
like I have done a couple events by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think only one, the 4x4 by 48, did I do by myself, and it was fine. But like, I finished my last 4 mile and was like in the park and kind of like, it's like Forrest Gump. Like, I guess I'll go home now. It was like,
Yeah.
I mean, sure, is there value to that? Okay, but we would encourage people. It's a beautiful program because you don't have to travel across the country,
Yeah.
and you can do it in the comfort of whatever your setup is. And also, if you have a friend, two friends, the ability to travel an hour,
Yeah.
other doing it virtually with someone, just making that extra little effort, I think would go a long way. So if you are going to do it, we encourage people that the end is actually Thanksgiving weekend. Obviously, if you have, hey, get the family out. Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
You want to work off that turkey? I have
Yeah.
something for you.
We won't pay for therapy, but go for it.
Right.
Force them into
Um,
pain.
so, take some time. Again, the training for this it opens up October 1st. So you have the rest of September to kind of figure out the logistics, maybe work with people to get them to sign up if they're on the fence, asking questions, sending us messages, whatever we can do to help facilitate, people making the decision to do this or not. But speaking from our weekend experience of challenge and movement, I would be shocked for someone to do this and feel like they got nothing out of it or were disappointed.
Yeah. And I think that's the value of doing stuff that you don't know how it's going to go and learning and all of that sounds really good. But the truth of the matter is, it's hard.
Yeah.
And there is something about challenging yourself physically, sharing it with others, and then seeing what comes up. Like that was an intent for me to see what would come up because I have a vision of myself. I have a view of myself
Hmm.
that I kind of buy into unintentionally, unconsciously. And there's this arduous experience that challenges you in many, many ways. That is like a mirror. It's like a mirror and a window, a mirror that reflects back and a window through which you look into yourself. And for us to, create that, share that for others, facilitate it, and watch people go through that and transform, um, like that's super cool.
Yeah.
And
So, if you're interested in the Vector project, you can find it on our website. You can find it on our Instagram. You can send us a message. Registration is open. Training starts October 1. Culmination event is in the end of November. So, hope to see you there.
cool.